Friendly greetings, it's me, Torley. And so, what are going to follow here is some of my thoughts on creativity. I have many of them, and they're all related in some way. It's quite kinetic. But today in particular, I'm wondering about your style of approaching work. Work not just in drudgy, grudgy sort of things, but when you're flowing with your art, your handiwork, as it were, your craft work. The robots. So for me, I'm more of what I call batch mode express. I've tried lots of different working styles, but what I find works really well for me is setting an hour or more than an hour stretch of hours to focus on a given intense task. For example, on the weekends, I will have gathered up throughout the week. I gather up using the Read It Later add-on for Firefox version 1 or less than that, I think, because version 2 has iffy user interface issues. I don't like those. But with Read It Later, I can quickly click this check mark. It adds all these things to a folder. And on the weekend, that's what I'll read or I'll watch, because a bunch of these are videos too. So I'll devour them. I'll often see connections between them. And it's funny because talking to you about this, just letting it out, is easier than writing. When I'm typing writing, which has its charm, text, then I think, gotta rephrase it. Maybe it didn't come out right the first time. But when you just let it flow, so having both, and I know YouTube is adding, what is it now, the auto transcription. So it's just nice to have a flowing conversation, and hopefully they will not mangle too many of my words. So for me, like I was saying, batch mode express, and then I can get the most out of it. I'm not distracted. At the same time, it's not true anti-multitasking because I have many tabs open and there's different things. I try to weave them. Two different blogs about sound design might have cited the same source. And then I look at both of them and say, well, here's where, like a Venn diagram, they're converging, and the outside circles where they're diverging, as it will, I always like to pronounce, or provide the alternative pronunciations. In addition to that, this is true especially with my music. I like to really get into there. I don't really surf the web when I'm making music, except there's a notable exception if I'm looking for more sounds. I'm like, let's go over to Freesound. Let's go over to just some other sites where I can download some samples. And it's really, really cool because when I was younger, having to get some of these sounds, of course, I had a dial-up connection. It's hard to imagine that. The internet wasn't always on, but the dangerous thing is with it being always on, it can suck your productivity away because you get distracted. I'm going to check my email, and soon enough your track is off track like an Amtrak. Well, I don't mean to cause any harm to Amtrak. I'm just saying that's sometimes what people say, as it were. I would like to ride a bullet train. I would like to ride a bullet train that goes through mountains, and like that Crystal Method video, forget the name of it. But that's a really cool one. That sort of experience, except not with weird people looking at the train as it go by, because that would be both too fast realistically and be creepy. So another thing that creeps into the equation of all this is gear forums where, and I'm not going to make it too techie geeky if you're not a music maker yourself, because a lot of my analogies, a lot of my lessons, first of all, they specifically apply to music, but not only that, they can apply to the grander arts. And whether you consider yourself a creator, a consumer, I think all creators are consumers as well, but some people consider themselves only consumers, or some sort of mix of both. Or you may, for instance, be a graphic designer who loves listening to music, or a musician who likes looking at the ballet and taking that in. It crosses all over. The key thing with what I teach, what I preach, that makes it sound so formal, but it's really fun, isn't it? Is if you can apply it, if you see a space for it, if you can take what I've said and really amplify the awesome, use it to enhance your life and the lives of others, then it has achieved what I have always intended it to. And then you can adapt it and so forth. But back to what I was saying about gear forums. I don't really get into them now. I used to, but with experience, Here's the thing. When experience means that you have a rich diversity of so many various experiences that you have seen and foreseen, so many variations on a theme that you can anticipate what's going to happen. So often in these forums where they talk about music gear, there are discussion threads, wherein someone, an innocent poster, perhaps they're probably new, an initiate or a novice to the forum, they will ask something like, what is it now? How do I sound like insert name of X or Y artist here? And then you always, it's so funny, the archetypes on these forums. If it gets responses and starts going, gets some activity, you always hear from the same types of people. I almost sometimes think, are you the same guy just posting on different forums under a different name? Because they sound the same. So one person will be quite harsh and say, why are you trying to rip off X? Get your own sound, learn it your own way. And they'll often have a curt answer that doesn't go into specifics of any tools that might be useful. Now, someone else might be quite helpful. And some people even go to the degree, I've seen this quite frequently, of trying to recreate the sound for themselves. And then they post an MP3 example or a patch. You can download it and put it in your soft sampler or whatever and play it. And you're like, oh, now I can deconstruct it. And then, of course, there's always the arguments. It starts to go into the real versus fake, and then it gets into the more semantic discussion or arguments, just not even worthwhile of a discussion of, why are you trying to rip them off further? And that gets compounded and compounded and compounded more. And these are the funny personalities that you often see on, say, the archetypes of a TV show. There's the rabble rouser, the white knight that comes in the same. It's funny. I don't know if it's because as humans we're predisposed towards certain types, but some people, like I believe myself to be, do not conform to one of those types. We may have tried those different roles, but ultimately, when I go to music forums now, it's with specific purpose. I don't get a lot of great joy out of just shooting the shiznit, as they say, because I've just seen and posted. I've made over 100,000. I've lost count after that forum post on so many different kinds of forums, from trance music to Star Trek to virtual worlds like Second Life, and so on and so forth. Cyberpunk stuff, all sorts of my interests. Asperger's syndrome. Not sure if I'm recollecting. 100,000 may be kind of conservative, but in the grand scheme of things, I go for what's useful, what's fun. So if I'm looking at these forums, I'm looking for a specific answer. I may ask a question myself, but I don't waste time, because arguments do happen over, it starts to get into a rivalry. Another archetype you may notice in these, how do I sound like so-and-so threads? Someone will say, well, why do you want to sound like so-and-so? They suck. You should listen to so-and-so instead, derailing the original intent of the asker, and they don't end up getting that desired help. And so often people, they don't read the whole thread through. So what's the point, really? We only have so much limited time. If you're not willing to spend that time, don't apologize, just don't get involved. If you can't make that commitment to earnestly being not just a civil, but a cool and awesome human being, and going there to share your knowledge like that. So that's one of the things I noticed. And with these predictabilities, these patterns, then you should never, of course, feel, well, I'm a hoity-toity above everyone else, but you can feel more confident that, I've seen that kind of stuff before. It doesn't bother me so much. It's like on every sort of community, when you first join, you get sort of a drubbing and sort of this hazing right, even a virtual one, as pathetic as that sounds. But you get brought in the community that way, and before you know it, you're an old bee with a king, and you're like, you're young whippersnappers. And it's so funny that way, but eminently so true for so many instances that I have ever seen across so many forums. And it's the same reason why I think it's poisonous. It's poisonous if you are a musician or a wannabe musician. I use that in the best of terms because it's about growth. Even if you're a musician or an expert, you can keep growing that way. the words don't cover the breadth of your domain expertise, nor do they cover your personality. Some things, of course, people like to measure. People like to look at their Google Analytics and their blog hits, but there are so many things which can't be neatly quantified, but they give people a good feeling. Like, for example, like sex. Okay, that's the most obvious one. And I'm not going to go into lurid detail here, but it's like that funny question. It's like, how was it for you, baby? And it seems so awkward to ask from 0 to like a 10. What would you say that was? People don't do that. People don't judge their relationships on numbers like that. And another good reason is because day to day, of course, you may try to take a stab at a running average, but day to day you feel different. Some days I don't feel a damn whit inspired. I'm like, don't want to make music. I don't feel inspired. I don't want to make art. I'm a slacker. But what I find is so funny, if I force myself to put down a few notes, paint a few strokes, then I'm suddenly growing to that stage of inspiration. And looking back, I'm like, I'm so glad I spent that time to get into that. I'm so glad what I call the low mind reflex. It just conditions you to think, well, maybe you should just go to sleep today. And it happens to all of us. It happens to me. For any one of you, if you think that I'm some super maniacal productivity nut, you are partially correct. But I do spend a lot of time just lazing out, just slacking in my chair in the shower, just looking up at the ceiling, counting the tiles. And because it invites other thoughts to come in. If I'm always thinking thoughts, then it prevents me. It isolates me from the grander world here. So sometimes I just have that silence. And that's the reason why I can really respect that Zen ideology in this day and age. Even with so much going on, sometimes you just shh, and you just absorb what comes in. The strangest stuff comes in. But what I do also recommend is having a quick way to note that. I've noted that before. If you have not read Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way, please do. I'm in the midst of it, the first book of this series. It created a whole lifestyle, as it were. But it speaks, there's a concept called writing your morning pages, and 3 pages of any ideas, totally non-censored, just raw. What's on your mind and heart. And it can sound so stupid when you look at it. But the exercise is to force yourself to write, because then there might be something there you could use later, or a truth, or it helps you to grow, helps you to create and produce. Then this is the problem a lot with the internet, because you put on a draft, a sketch, and someone doesn't understand not just your experience, where they might make a pass at that, a bad one. They will judge you and destroy you, or try to, in vain, I hope, with words like, oh man, that sucks. And this is harsh on YouTube, of course. There's a lot of really stupid comments. That's just how it is. But throughout it all, you look for what is gemful, full of gems, jewelry. I don't particularly believe in jewelry as a valuable asset. I think it's kind of funny that people pay so much for painted rocks, colorful little stones. But the word gem, the word jewel, it's a beautiful word. And so on YouTube, I get those kinds of comments too, where someone doesn't ask the intent of what I was trying to create. They don't care anyway. They just watch it for 5 seconds and go on to the next. It's transient. And I'm not interested in that, because in this day and age, so much is transient. So much is replaceable and forgettable. And what I give a damn about, that sounded funny. What do I give a damn about? Like Batman, what do you want? I'm the Batman. Sorry, I get carried away. That's my mind. What I care about is those repeat relationships. It's still comforting. I think it'll always be, as long as we're human beings, that when you go into a restaurant, that they not only know your name, they know your preference. Like, you order something, you get the same waitress, and she says, oh, you want the house sauce on the side, as you always have it. If you can remember things like that and be attuned, it doesn't matter. I don't give a whit or a shit how many dollars you throw at making a multi-million-dollar store. If you lack those fundamental basics of being human and connecting, then something is seriously amiss. And that's what continues to hold value. And I think yes, it is true that if you give away too much, it becomes too easy to take it for granted, because we're tantalized by mystery. We want to know what more is coming. Even if this movie, this story is the only one and they're not making a sequel, part of the whole experience of what made this so enjoyable for you is precisely that you can imagine something else. And that's why with my dream journal, which is centered purely around imagination and what I dream about, they are bits and pieces. It's not a complete story. There's continuity, there's connections. My affinity for really, really catchy melodies, my love for warm sounds that transform into kind of colder ones and shift moods like melancholy, like nostalgia, and these sorts of things I just do unfettered, and I don't know the word is. I'm looking for a word and it doesn't exist. Maybe I'll have to invent it. But all in all, I put it forth in hopes that other like minds out there will hear it like a radio beaming signals like the SETI program and will unite, and that maybe you'll share some of your music or your art if you do that. And don't overrate what the word art means. It's not just a masterpiece in a museum. Art is what is good, pure, and true to you. So if you're expressing yourself and wearing clothes that you feel comfortable and great in, that is not just a fashion statement. That to me is art. Art takes many forms, streamlining your flow so you have more enjoyment out of a day, including if you're working on something which may be grueling, but you find a way to make it more fun and you add your creativity into it. That is quite artistic to me. So with the whole music shenanigans, this is why I'm going to not backtrack, but loop back to the thread where I was talking about. It's really discouraging if you're a new artist and you go some of these gear forums or YouTube and you get comments like that, and then you're like, oh, why do I even bother putting my art up? Or if there's silence and you expect reactions and you're like, oh, I don't get enough reactions. And that's a trouble, because humans, if you are in it doing the art and you're hungry, it's good to have ambition, but you're going to crave more and more, and you're going to get desensitized to little things that really do matter. And it's really, really tough. And also often being on a gear forum and just amongst really, especially technical musicians, because they'll talk about what the intricacies of which plugins they use. And yes, it is important to a degree, but it's often overstated. And it's also problematic, because then you get sucked into that mentality. That's your world, that's your culture, that's your buddy of friends that you're talking all about making this music, and you all start to sound alike. That's one potential problem. Another potential problem too is it sounds so discouraging because you hear of their failures and you think, well, I'm going to not amount to that either. And I can't say whether doing something like music, like any art, really is right for a full-time living. I don't do that right now. It's a hobby. It's a glorious one because, hey, my day job, to use a term which often is pejorative, as it were, but I don't use that at all. It's what I do in the day. It's an accurate fashion descriptor in the virtual world. Second Life is wonderful because I get a lot of ideas from all the blossoming creativity of what's happening. And it is like a waking dream, this surreal Philip K. Dickian reality. So if you do have a day job that is not drudge and that can support art as a hobby where you do it full time, part time, but the full time nature of who you are is as a creative person, then that's magnificent, because then it means with your art, you don't have to worry about pandering. And by pandering, I mean not just trying to please people, but pleasing people at the expense of pleasing yourself. That's the fundamental difference. If you make other people happy and you're happy, then like they say in the business buzzword world, that's a win-win. But if you go out of your way to make other people happy, but you're discontent, it saps what you can do and diminishes your chances, not just for making yourself happy, but for making other people happy as well. So for me, it's important to have, I will not cliche the term artistic integrity, but hey, I make the music that I want to hear, and if other people want to hear it too, that's fantastic. And I'm incredibly, incredibly grateful for all the support I've had so far. And I love hearing just the slices of life and experiences. I love hearing why someone decided to use my music as the background soundtrack for a video, or why they listen to it when they work or email or work out, sports, and all manner of life activities, those origin, those connection stories help me build and think about music in a fun sense. Yes, but as I often say, use fun, useful and fun. Because I believe music as a utility, and that sounds so cold to some people, but it's not just about being heartless. It's certainly not about being solely mechanical, but it's about if something has a purpose. And that's where the word utility connected to purpose can begin to warm up. And then you see, well, then I can broaden it and I can use it, enrich my life. Like analogy I'll often go on is you have a pair of blue jeans and they're comfortable. They're ripped and torn, but you like these blue jeans and they add a little something special to your day every day. Same thing with little things like how a cashier treats you after you check out from the store, and of course the music you listen to, one song that just uplifts you. It's one of those little butterfly effects because you start dancing, you start rocking out, and pretty much you're having an awesome day despite adversity being thrown at you, despite other challenges and things that you don't want to deal with, and some things you don't have to deal with at all. But it is within that effect of a small element that has that opportunity to holistically and healthily alter your life balance. So that's a few of my thoughts and where I'm at right now. I'm just going to end this recording, but I thank you for listening to me, and please do continue to share with me. I would really, really love that. This is Torley saying goodbye for now. Ooh, fuzzies!